Most people who find this channel don't search for it. They search for something else entirely. Why do I feel exhausted after being with people I actually like? Why do I feel like I'm always performing, even when I'm comfortable? Why does belonging feel like a costume I have to put on? And somewhere in the middle of looking for answers, they find the word, Otrovert. But knowing the word, and knowing if it's yours, those are two very different things. So today we're going to do something practical. 7 signs. Real ones. Not the kind you find on a listicle that could describe anyone on a bad Tuesday. These are the signs that Rami Kaminsky identified across 40 years of clinical observation. Patterns that appear specifically in people who are wired for Otroversion. By the end of this, you'll know. Sign 1. You don't just dislike small talk, you find it genuinely confusing. Not boring, not rude, confusing. When someone talks to you about the weather, or asks how your weekend was without actually wanting to know, there's a moment of real disorientation. What is this exchange for? What are we actually doing here? Most people navigate small talk on autopilot. It's a social lubricant, comfortable, familiar, easy. For Otroverts, it requires a kind of translation. They understand the mechanics of it, but it doesn't come naturally. It feels like speaking a second language you learned but never quite thought in. The important distinction. This isn't shyness. Shy people want to connect and feel blocked by fear. Otroverts simply don't understand why connection would happen through these particular words. Sign 2. You have a rich, almost involuntary inner life. Not a choice, not a hobby. An inner world that runs, whether you want it to or not. While someone else is watching a film, you're also watching the film, and simultaneously having 3 parallel conversations with yourself about what the film means, what it reminds you of, whether the director made the right choice in that particular scene, and what it says about the human condition. This isn't overthinking. It's not anxiety. It's the natural texture of an Otrovert's mind, layered, associative, always in motion beneath the surface. Kaminsky observed that Otroverts often report feeling more present in their inner world than in the room they're physically standing in. Not dissociation, just a different center of gravity. Sign 3. You need your relationships to have depth, or you lose interest entirely. Not gradually, entirely. There's no middle setting for Otroverts when it comes to connection. Either something real is happening, genuine exchange, actual ideas being shared, the feeling that both people are actually showing up, or the connection simply stops registering as meaningful. This can look cold from the outside. It isn't. It's a very high standard for what counts as real. Many Otroverts have described the experience of being in a friendship that looked perfectly healthy from the outside. Regular contact, shared history, genuine warmth, and still feeling like strangers to each other. Because nothing beneath the surface had ever actually been touched. Sign 4. You've always had the feeling of watching life rather than simply living it. Like there's a pane of glass between you and whatever is happening. Not detachment in the clinical sense, not depression. More like you are simultaneously in the room, and slightly above the room, observing the room, aware that you are in a room. This is one of the most consistent markers Kaminsky found. He called it double consciousness, the Otrovert's perpetual awareness of themselves as a participant and as an observer simultaneously. It can feel like a curse in moments that are supposed to be fully lived. A beautiful dinner where part of you is thinking, "This is a beautiful dinner." A moment of joy where you're also watching yourself, experiencing the joy. But it's also the source of something rare. The ability to see clearly what others are too close to see. The capacity for honest observation. The distance that makes perspective possible. Sign 5. You feel most like yourself in transit. On a train, in the car alone at night, walking somewhere with headphones in airports, in the early hours before the day begins. These in-between spaces, where you belong to no place and no one has claim on you, feel more like home than most homes. This is deeply characteristic of Otroverts. The limen, the threshold, the in-between, is where they breathe most easily. Not because they're running from something, but because the in-between is the only place where no one expects you to be anything in particular. No role, no performance, just movement and the quiet that comes with it. Sign 6. You've been called too much and not enough, often by the same people. Too intense, too serious, too quiet, too in your head. And then, not enough, not open enough, not present enough, not fun enough, not easy enough to be around. The contradiction is the point. Otroverts don't fit the templates people use to calibrate their social expectations. So they get measured against a standard they were never built for, and found lacking in multiple directions simultaneously. If you've spent years adjusting yourself to be less of one thing and more of another, and the complaints kept coming anyway, it's worth asking whether the problem was ever actually with you. The 7th sign is different from the others. The first 6 could, in theory, describe a highly sensitive person, or a deeply introverted one, or someone with a rich imaginative life. Sign 7 is the one that belongs specifically, almost exclusively, to the Otrovert. You don't want to belong, you want to resonate. Belonging is about fitting into something that already exists. A group, a tribe, a shared identity that others recognize and accept you into. Most people need this. It's a fundamental human drive, to be part of something, to be included, to have your place confirmed by others. Otroverts feel this differently. When they imagine connection at its best, it isn't being welcomed into a group. It's a single moment with a single person, where something true is exchanged. A conversation that goes somewhere real. A silence that doesn't need to be filled. The specific feeling of being in a room with someone and knowing, without performance, without effort, that this person understands the frequency you're broadcasting on. Kaminsky calls this resonance. And he's clear. Otroverts don't need many of these moments. They need them to be real. One real conversation can sustain an Otrovert for weeks in a way that 100 pleasant surface interactions cannot. And the absence of resonance, not the absence of people, but the absence of that specific quality of contact, is what actually makes an Otrovert lonely. So, 7 signs. How many landed? Not as a score, not as a diagnosis, just as information about yourself that maybe you didn't have language for before. Because that's what this is really about. Language. When you don't have a word for something you experience, you often conclude that the experience is the problem. That you are too much, or not enough, or broken in some quiet way that you've never been able to name. A word doesn't fix anything, but it does something important. It separates the experience from the shame. It says, this is a pattern, not a flaw. This is a wiring, not a wound. Next week, we go into the Otrovert and love. Why relationships feel different when you're wired this way. Why resonance is harder to find than belonging, and infinitely more worth looking for. If these 7 signs described someone you recognize, you're in the right place. Stay with us.